Sir, you talked about teacher quality. I mean, I think that, in essence, what you were getting at. We want to have a profound impact on teaching and learning and keeping kids in school. We've got to address teacher quality. I don't know if anybody saw the newscast about 2 weeks ago where they had President Obama at the University of Texas. Data had recently come out that some country, Guam or somebody, jumped ahead of the United States in the percentage of young people who graduate from college. So now it's a crisis now, and he stood up there and said, within 10 years, we're going to increase our college graduation rates by 20%. Well, he won't be in office. So it ain't gonna, the likelihood that that's going to happen, it's like Goals 2000. Anybody remember Goals 2000? Like from 1992? By the year 2000, every child will be reading on grade level. Well, those things just don't work that way. But then in that report, they interviewed some experts afterwards. And what did the experts say? The problem is not with the university or college system. The problem is with the secondary schools in America. Oh, well, great. Let's blame all the high schools. We can blame the middle schools and blame the elementary schools and blame the parents, and we're all covered. Then they interviewed the Secretary of Education, and he said, well, some things we're looking at are a longer school year and a longer school day. I don't know the quality will improve with quantity. But what about teacher quality? How many teachers are there in America? About 6 million. 6 million teachers. What if 1% of them are really weak teachers? Just 1%. That's 60,000 teachers. What if one teacher in your school is a low-performing teacher? What's the impact? How many kids do they see? I was in middle school the other day, teachers see 130, 40 kids a day. One low-performing person. What if you get 2 low-performing people? What do we do to address teacher quality? Well, I already said that. I jumped ahead of myself. But think about your own school, your own district. As I said, I really think failure to address teacher quality is also educational malpractice. And so much of this is an attitude. I think you can learn, I know you can learn skills and strategies and techniques to become a better teacher. I don't know that you can learn to have a better attitude. I'll be happy today. Let's all be happy, okay? Some people just aren't happy. You know those people, right? All through life there are Tiggers and Eeyores, right? Who do you run with? Do you run with the Tiggers or do you run with the Eeyores? If you hang around with Eeyores, you become Eeyorish. If you run with Tiggers, you become more Tiggerish, right? Who do you want to hang around with? Who are the fun people? Who are people who are pumped up, excited about doing what they're doing? And not just for a day, but every day. Did you ever anybody ever brought a speaker into their classroom? Have you ever brought a speaker into your classroom? Yeah, and they come in for like a half hour, and they go, oh, this is easy. Oh, I'll do that again next year. Yeah, it's easy for a half hour. Do it for 35 years. Then we'll see if you can stay pumped up all the time. It's not a simple thing to do. I'm going to just tell you a quick story about the biggest Eeyore I ever had. His name was Joe. Joe was a math teacher. No, this is not anything against math. Don't start throwing stuff at me here. Joe happened to be a math teacher by chance. And we were experiencing overcrowding. And we had a teaming model where we teamed all of our kids in 9th and 10th grade on interdisciplinary teaching teams, and they looped 9th and 10th grade, stayed with the same teachers for 2 years. I'll talk more about that in one of the breakout sessions. But what happened was, Joe was not on a 9th, 10th grade team. He'd been teaching for 20 years, and he had been in his classroom for 20 years, same classroom. Now, you folks know it is easier to evict a teacher from their home than it is to take them out of their classroom. Well, I had met with Joe in the spring. It was May, and this decision was based purely on what was the best interest of children. And I said, Joe, you're going to be going from one classroom to another, splitting your time during the day. He was not happy. He thought that was a personal attack. He'd been in that same classroom for 20 years. I said, well, these are the reasons. He didn't want to hear the reasons, but that's the way it is. So we go to summer vacation. We come back next fall. I see Joe. He's going from one class to the next, and he's carrying all this stuff. I think he carried extra stuff on purpose just to make it look more dramatic. And I say, hey, Joe, how you doing? And he goes, oh, yeah, you did this to me. You know, I got to carry all this stuff because of you. So I went back to my office. I was meeting with my assistant principals, and I said, geez, I just saw Joe. He's such an Eeyore. And they said, you know, I said, what can we do? You have any ideas? And one of my assistant principals said, you know what, we should get him a cart. He carries all that stuff, let's get him a cart. I said, that's a great idea. I went up to the bowels of the AVA room. You know, because in public education, you can't throw anything away. We have an ID number on everything. And even in a nuclear attack, that stuff would stay on. So you go back behind the giant opaque projector. Remember those? Anybody remember those? Big giant gray thing that you put a book in there and it would project the page up on the... If the book didn't catch on fire, it would project. If a kid sat too close to it, he'd get a little burn on the side of his face, you know? Put a little aloe on that, you'd be okay. Back behind there is the ditto machines, mimeograph machines. Remember those? Some of you are too young. You have to go to museums, right, sir? Like that. That's the real old ones. Then they had motorized ones, but you're going back to the crankers. You know, do the ditto. I mean, you know, I think it was a '60s dance. But and how many of you ever made dittos? Right. Now you all did this, and I'm not going to ask you to admit to it, but every one of you at some point went in early to make dittos. You looked around, you filled that thing up with as much ink as it would hold. And you looked around to see if anybody else was there. You didn't even need dittos that day. But you started cranking them out. And you took that first one off, you looked around. Talk about rehab, you know, who said rehab? You know, people, you don't even know what you did the first 2 hours of the day. All you knew about 10 o'clock, I gotta go make some more dittos. Get some Doritos on the way, you know. I had people in rehab after we took those out of the building. Well, behind there was the cart. So we got all these carts, and every cart's the same, right? They were all gray metal with a rust stain on top. And they all have one bad wheel. When you push them, they all do. I think they make them that way to keep the custodians in business. They're in cahoots with the custodians' unions. So, because then they get their tennis ball and go and, you know, clean them up. So, it'd make that black mark down all. So I take a cart, I give it to Joe. Well, Joe looks at me like I have 3 heads, and he leaves. And after about a week, 2 weeks, no evidence of the cart. I see nothing. I see Joe carrying all his stuff. Then all of a sudden, one day, I'm walking down the hall, and I hear behind me, I turn around. It's Joe. He's put a horn on his cart. He's got a rear view mirror on his cart. He's painted it school colors. Joe became a little less of an Eeyore that day. But think about, who do we hire? Who do we go after? Who do we want to be around? Just that enthusiasm. You think about that list we had about what's important to kids, what would help them do better in school. Does that person want to be there? You know, improving teacher quality, inspect what you expect. I think one of peer observations. I don't know if you remember the old TESSA model. Back in the 80s, we used to have the opportunity to go and see each other teach. How do you get better without feedback? Seeing what each other do, talking about it. Because if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And we see people standing and lecturing over and over. I talk about the 10-minute meetings where I sit with a teacher and ask them to bring 3 samples of student work and some instrument or homework or test or quiz that they've used to evaluate their students in the last week. And we talk about it. Why this test? Why this quiz? Why this homework? This student was a high performer. This one was a medium performer. This was a low performer. What made him a high performer? What skills did they demonstrate to you? What was the level of depth and knowledge of these questions? What was the purpose of this? Those conversations are powerful. Looking at individual teachers and individual teacher data, not to say, hey, oh, you're doing a bad job. But people hide in groups. Breaking data down is critically important, as you all know.